This video was sponsored by kenhub. This is the lumbar plexus, the network of interwoven nerves that branches out from your low back. Together, they communicate nervous information to structures in the low back, hips, and legs. And in this video, we'll look at how this thing is organized and where those nerves end up going. Hello and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Patrick, and this channel is all about anatomy and physiology. The lumbar plexus is one of the major nerve plexuses in the body, along with the brachial plexus, which innervates the arm, the cervical plexus, which innervates the neck and shoulders, and the sacral plexus, which innervates the leg. The lumbar plexus innervates some parts of the hip, pelvis, and leg while branching out of the low back. But we actually need to be even more specific, because when we point to any given spinal nerve in a plexus, we're interested in a piece called the anterior ramus, which actually contributes to the plexus. When I say anterior ramus, I'm pointing to a split at the spinal root itself. Each spinal root typically has a posterior ramus that pokes backwards into the skin and muscles around the spine, while the anterior ramus contributes to the plexus and becomes a bigger peripheral nerve. For the lumbar plexus, we're focused on the anterior rami of spinal roots T12, L1, L2, L3, and L4. Those roots are named after the vertebrae above them. So spinal root L1 pops out between lumbar vertebrae 1 and 2, lumbar spinal root 4 pops out between L4 and L5, and so on. Now, the lumbar plexus is in a pretty crowded neighborhood. The massive psoas major muscle originates on those same lumbar vertebrae, and the nerves of the lumbar plexus have to weave around and sometimes within the psoas major to get to their destinations. And the psoas muscle is actually going to be a reference point throughout the lesson. The subdivisions of the lumbar plexus get their name depending on their relationship to the muscle, either lateral, anterior, or medial to the psoas. The majority fall into the lateral subdivision, which includes the iliohypogastric nerve, ilioinguinal nerve, lateral cutaneous nerve of the thigh, and the femoral nerve. Meanwhile, there's only one nerve in the plexus of the anterior subdivision, the genitofemoral nerve. Finally, the medial subdivision features the obturator nerve, accessory obturator nerve, and the nerve that becomes the lumbosacral trunk. Cool, now that we're all oriented, we can go into a little more depth. First up, the iliohypogastric and ilioinguinal nerves. Both of these guys branch off of the spinal root L1 and get some nerves from spinal root T12, and their names give us all the information we need. Iliohypogastric starts with ilio, which refers to the ilium, the wide curvy bone of the pelvis. Hypo means low, and gastro means stomach. This nerve is for sure pointing to the ilium, but the hypogastric part refers to where it starts. Remember that it originates mostly at L1, which is lower than the most inferior part of the stomach. That makes it hypogastric, or below the stomach. So all in all, the iliohypogastric nerve is a nerve that points to the ilium, starting below the stomach. Ilioinguinal gets the same ilio prefix, followed by inguinal, which is the region between your hip and pubic bone. This nerve also runs parallel to the ilium for a bit before tracing the inguinal line towards the pubis. As long as you anchor yourself in gross anatomy, this one makes sense. The inguinal region is inferior to the gastric region, just like how the ilioinguinal nerve is inferior to the iliohypogastric nerve. It's all regional terms and directional terms. So their names give us their location, but they also give us hints about their innervation. Both of these nerves are mixed, and they both innervate the transverse abdominis muscle, the deep muscle that wraps around the abdomen like a corset. They also both innervate the internal oblique muscle. Now, both of those muscles are really broad muscles, so it makes sense that they'd get input from multiple nerves. Then, as we trace the nerves even further, each nerve's sensory innervation becomes more precise. The iliohypogastric nerve splits into an anterior cutaneous branch and a lateral cutaneous branch, both of which communicate sensory information from the ab muscles back to the brain. They also handle the skin just above the pubic area and the skin on the sides of your glutes. The ilioinguinal nerve has simpler sensory responsibilities. It handles sensory information from the skin directly around it, which is the inguinal region and some parts of the genitals. Now, the iliohypogastric and ilioinguinal are the only nerves in the lumbar plexus that get input from T12, but a few more get some input from spinal root L1. That next nerve, the genitofemoral nerve, is made from branches of spinal roots L1 and L2, and the name implies where they're going. Down, or inferiorly towards the genitals and the femur. This nerve innervates some anterior structures, which puts it in the anterior subdivision of the plexus. And we can actually see it go anteriorly to the psoas major in this diagram. Then, as we travel inferiorly, we see the genitofemoral nerve split into the genital branch and the femoral branch, or what's often called the lumboinguinal nerve to avoid confusion with the actual femoral nerve, which we'll get to in a second. The genital branch innervates the skin of the scrotum and cremaster muscle, or the labia majora and mons pubis, depending on what hardware you're working with. Meanwhile, the lumboinguinal nerve innervates the femoral triangle, that fleshy part of your inner thigh right below the hip joint. This is another nerve name that tells you its function. Lumbo refers to its origin in the low back, while the inguinal part refers to where it innervates, that region between the anterior hip and the pubis. Back to the plexus, we're done with everything branching off L1, and we're done with the anterior subdivision, but we need to revisit the lateral subdivisions. Spinal roots 2 and 3 have posterior divisions that become the lateral cutaneous nerve of the thigh. You can also say lateral femoral cutaneous nerve, they're the same thing. As the name implies, it's cutaneous, so it only relays sensory information, but it has a wide domain. It covers everything from the peritoneum, which is the lining of the abdomen, to the skin of the front and side of the thigh. Next up, we've got the femoral nerve, which I think of as the centerpiece of the lumbar plexus. It's made from branches of L2, L3, and L4 and heads down the leg, or femoral region. You can actually see it really well when looking at the femoral triangle, a region made by the sartorius, adductor longus muscles, and the inguinal ligament. The femoral nerve splits into two mixed nerves, the anterior branch and posterior branch. That anterior division splits into the medial cutaneous nerve and intermediate cutaneous nerve, which innervates the skin on the anterior medial thigh. Remember, we already had the lateral cutaneous nerve of the thigh that handled the skin of the lateral thigh, so these branches of the femoral nerve handle the other sides. Aside from its sensory component, the anterior division branches off into some motor nerves as well, plugging into the pectineus and the sartorius. The posterior division of the femoral nerve only splits into one sensory nerve, the saphenous nerve, which goes down past the adductors and innervates the skin of the medial lower leg. It's actually the longest nerve in the body. Otherwise, some of the other branches of the posterior division send motor signals to the quadriceps. Alright, that's it for the femoral nerve, but a quick heads up. If you Google lumbar plexus, then you'll get an image that looks like this. It labels the lateral femoral cutaneous nerve and femoral nerve as posterior divisions and everything else as anterior divisions. That's because that diagram maker was trying to show those two nerves' positioning in reference to the other nerves of the plexus, not to the psoas major. And they are more posterior than the other nerves in the next group, what I'm still referring to as the medial division. Back on the plexus, we see that the anterior divisions of L2, L3, and L4 merge together into the obturator nerve. Obturator comes from the Latin for obstruction, and anatomically, that refers to an obstruction of the obturator foramen, that hole in the pelvic bone which is obstructed by the obturator muscles. Sure enough, the obturator nerve dives straight down to innervate the obturator externus muscle, plus all the major hip adductor muscles. It also takes sensory information from the skin of the medial thigh, basically the skin around the muscles it innervates. Before we get to the last nerve, there's a little guy that sometimes branches off of the L3 and L4 spinal roots, the accessory obturator nerve. I say sometimes because this nerve is present in maybe 13% of people according to cadaver studies, although that number depends on which study you're reading. When they are present though, they provide some extra innervation to the pectineus and hip joint. Finally on the plexus, you'll notice that there's a branch off of spinal root 4 that meets up with the root below it, L5. Those two merge into the lumbosacral trunk, which merges with the other spinal roots off the sacrum to become the sacral plexus. It'll go on to form the sciatic nerve, and it'll give off some other branches. But because the lumbar plexus overlaps with the sacral plexus like this, some people will teach it together as the lumbosacral plexus. I decided not to because the sacral plexus video, which you can watch here, is already pretty long. Alright, let's get some practice filling out the lumbar plexus diagram. Like the other plexuses, start by labeling the relevant bony landmarks. In this case, thoracic vertebra 12 and lumbar vertebrae 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And since the lumbar plexus is so much simpler than the brachial or sacral plexuses, I actually don't recommend using mnemonics for this one. If you get a diagram like this, I'd start by identifying the femoral nerve and treating it like your anchor. Most of the nerves superior to it are the lateral group, and all the nerves inferior to it are the medial group. The exception is the genitofemoral nerve, which is the only nerve in the anterior group. Label that one right away so you can move on to the lateral group. From there, it's iliohypogastric and ilioinguinal. Remember your regional terms. The gastric region, or stomach, is superior to the inguinal region, and the hypogastric nerve is superior to the ilioinguinal nerve. In between those two and the femoral nerve is the lateral cutaneous nerve of the thigh. I remember this one because if your diagram does look like this one, the lateral cutaneous is pretty chunky, which means it's probably following the big femoral nerve down the leg to do some of the heavy-duty innervation. Moving on, we already labeled the anterior group, which was just the genitofemoral nerve, so that one's easy. Finally, the medial chunk is everything down here that pokes downward. I remember the obturator because it's literally pointing towards an O in the pelvis, and I remember the lumbosacral trunk because it's our anatomical bridge to the next plexus. Then the accessory obturator nerve is only sometimes present, so after the process of elimination, you've got a fully labeled lumbar plexus. Before you go, all those beautiful illustrations you saw in this video were kindly provided by kenhub. And if you want to learn more about the lumbar plexus or any other anatomy topic, then you need to check them out. kenhub is an anatomy learning platform that I use all the time when writing and fact-checking these videos. They've got an enormous library of in-depth videos and articles about gross anatomy, histology, blood vessels, and everything else you'll learn in anatomy class. Most of the illustrations I showed you today came from kenhub's atlas, which often comes with multiple angles and illustrations of each structure, as well as cadaver images and cross-sections. In addition to their library of content, I love kenhub's quiz feature. They allow you to take different types of quizzes with varying difficulties, and they'll give you personalized feedback so you can figure out your weaknesses and quiz on just that material. You can also create your own custom quiz by selecting the structures and topics you want to be quizzed on. You can use most of kenhub's features for free, but if you want full access to all of their content and quizzes, and there is a lot of them, you can go to khub.me/corporis for 10% off your subscription. They've also got a no questions asked 7-day money-back guarantee, so you can try out their premium version for 7 days, and if you don't like it for whatever reason, you can get your money back. Big thanks to kenhub for sponsoring this series. I got more videos in the Plexus series in this playlist right here. I got basics about the nervous system right here, crowdfunding right here, and a subscribe button right here. Thank you to all my patrons. Have fun. Be good. Thanks for watching.